the share infrastructure for smart is really poised to accelerate in the coming years. No doubt about that.
Igor Leprince, Group Chief Executive Officer of BAI Communications. Welcome.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for inviting me.
Igor, can you tell me something about BAI's vision for smart communities and how neutral host infrastructure and small cells are going to complement 5G and associated technologies like analytics?
All right. So quite a lot of topics in your quite a lot of hot topics in your question. I think let me start by saying that smart city, and before I get to smart community, smart city application really rely on very robust communication network. And we at BI, I'm sure we'll talk about that, are expert at providing that really at scale to support the next generation connectivity and smart city development. So I think that's for me the starting point. But a smart community can be a high street in the city where you're putting together a set of local business and to have same sort of connectivity, deliver services in a way that helps, let's say, the municipality, for example, and improve the citizen services, the associated social and economic care. So that's the way we define smart community. Now,
yes.
Why neutral hosts to do that? I guess a neutral host provider like us, partnering with the MNO, I think we have a big role to play in supporting this public-private enterprise, establishing the smart community within their organization or across a campus, and contributing really to the smart city development in a meaningful way. So I guess that's to answer your question around the neutral host. Now on the small cell, I think the trend is very clear that and that's an important factor in the 5G story, that the share infrastructure for smart is really poised to accelerate in the coming years. No doubt about that, in a very growing number. I think it's as early as last week, I was reading on the small cell forum that we're part of the fact that the neutrals are expected to account for 30% of new deployment of small cell infrastructure by 2026, and 20% of the installed base. So it's a huge increase from the current level. So I guess that's answering your question around what's smart community, what's our vision for that, how neutrals help to do that, and I guess how small cell complements that and complements 5G and important in that, Tom.
BAI Communications made a large acquisition that in particular is of interest in the United States, and that's the acquisition of Mobilitie. What are the implications for that acquisition?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is that we are very excited about the acquisition of Mobilitie. I think it fits, and maybe we'll have the opportunity to come back to that, perfectly with our growth strategy, but also from a scope, from a scale, from geography. And it's a bit of a one of a kind opportunity, really, because it aligns almost perfectly with our core business as a provider of neutral host communication services that we just talked about, but also our expertise in transit. So really, if you look at their scope, and just a quick reminder is 220 venues across 40 states, 10,000 small cell, 300 towers, but also transit communication contract for the public transit system in Seattle and San Francisco Bay Area. It's almost like exactly where our portfolio and where our scope is. Now, what it will also give us is frankly a national scale and presence across the entire United States. And right now we are present through Transit Wireless largely around New York and the East Coast. But I think it will help significantly to accelerate our development in the region, and also frankly enhance really the broader offering that we have around in our key global markets that we might have a chance to talk about. So really, in summary, it's really acquisition help us to be more effective in delivering the benefit of neutral host infrastructure, benefit also Mobilitie customer from additional funding, additional capability that we bring from around the world, and really fulfill our ambition for growth on the neutral hosts and for growth in the US, really, though.
Mobilitie clearly has that overlap that you mentioned with its involvement in transit communications and small cells. How interested are you in macro towers in the United States? Mobility has 300. Are you looking to increase or divest, or does that have any interest for you?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that we obviously in BI have towers today already. We yes. Run, as you probably know, about 700 towers in Australia. 4 telcos, but obviously for broadcast as well. So that this is absolutely part of our business, and that's part of the portfolio we're acquiring for Mobility. Obviously we've been more well known for, let's call it the transit system, the underground and the slightly above ground, which is more around, small cells and dense urban type of environment that more where rural sites is, which is, anywhere around the country, including rural areas. But, very, very clearly for us, this is an interesting part of the portfolio of Mobility. And, we have not even closed the acquisition. As you know, this is still on the regulatory clearance.
Oh, yes.
So it would be inappropriate for me to say anything more than that. But we are excited about the towers like we are around about the rest of the portfolio Mobility, and that's why we acquired a company.
You just said that you can't say anything more about it than that, which is why I'm going to ask you to say something more about that. I'm just curious. You may not have an answer to this, but is there anything that was a pleasant surprise to you about Mobility, some gem within Mobility that you didn't expect, that you said, "Well, this is wonderful to have this too"?
Yeah, I think what we're excited about Mobility is obviously the portfolio, what they have, but I think it's the opportunity for growth. And yes. For me, it's growing the portfolio that they have. And again, that's venues, that's small cells, that's towers. This is obviously deploying the contract that I mentioned. For example, the one in San Francisco Bay Area is one that will be deployed in the years to come. I think for me, it's the interesting thing, maybe you call it the gem, is the fact that how can we really boost the growth of this portfolio outside the US first? And I know they have tried in the last few years. So using really the presence that we have in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, in Canada, in Hong Kong to develop really this portfolio, but also how we drive private network. We're pretty strong believer on the power of private networks, and private networks is to some extent not too different to some of the big venues that BAI Mobility has deployed, for example. So I think that might be the gem, which is the growth that trajectory that Mobility has, but also the additional growth that the combination with BAI could bring, and that's what we're excited about.
There's so much news involving BAI. I'm going to turn to another subject, and that's your agreement with Signify, manufacturer of poles. How is that going to be helpful to BAI Communications?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the partnership really is about, I guess, is about combining what I talked about, which is our portfolio of neutral host facilities and capabilities, with the fact that Signify has a very innovative portfolio in connected lighting with things like gigabit transmission, integrated luminaires, smart poles, smart hubs. I mean, many things that that are not top of my mind right now. So I think the interest is really the combination of the two, and really combining the expertise of the two businesses that to boost a little bit the extensive capability to support these fixed mobile operators and municipality for this smart city opportunity and 5G services that we talked about, and that's where we see the partnership, and we're going to test this partnership also on the go-to-market side, but also on some of the projects that we announced. I hope you will ask about TfL, and that's one of the area where this partnership we will test this partnership, as well as testing it is on the part of our portfolio as well. So.
I can take a prompting. What have you announced about TfL?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for that. Thanks for reacting to my prompt, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of exciting news for BI in the last few months, to say the least. Actually, these two announcements, TfL and Mobility, were within a week. So, very excited. Just as a summary, it's a 20 years contract or concession with Transport for London, really there to design, to build, to implement let's call it a city-wide integrated communication network, and that will deliver cellular, Wi-Fi, and fiber connectivity across the city, really. And that's been really in the work for many years. So it's really exciting for us to be able to announce it, but also to start working on that. And it's when I think about it, it's probably the largest and probably the most advanced infrastructure project of this type in the world that has never been done. So a very exciting project, and maybe even more exciting for me being London based, maybe. But maybe talk a little bit more about what it is exactly we're going to do, because there's been a lot of communication on that. So it's a 5G ready communication network that will operate as a neutral host, so a neutral host for fixed and mobile operators, and just to really there to fast track London evolution as a smart city. The first phase of the project is really rollout of this multi-carrier infrastructure, so allowing fixed and mobile operators to provide 5G ready coverage to all the customers across the London Underground, so all the stations, all the tunnels as well, and it's not existing today. But it's actually a lot more than this. It's also a high capacity fiber network running throughout the London Underground, so really enable the fiber service provider to provide full fiber connectivity to premises across the city. So that's a big part of the project. But it's also back to what we were discussing earlier. It's tens of thousands of streetscape assets, including light poles and things like that, and bus stops that can be used for small cells, 5G coverage, 5G capacity, but also for IoT, 5G smart city use cases, really, and many things that we can't even think about. So that's the third part of the project.
That's all part of the Transport for London, all those street poles?
Absolutely. That's all part of this transport. And as I said, it's tens of thousands of streetscape, of very valuable streetscape assets, including the station and the walls of the station itself. It's also building, and something we're very proud of, building and operating the emergency services network in the tube. So, it's really a huge project that combines pretty much all the things we talked about. Transit communication, for sure, that's the core of it, but also 5G outdoor, fiber, smart city. And, for us, it's a very important step, and hopefully the first of many projects in the UK, and also helping us to branch into other countries in Europe, really, Tom.
Can you speak a little bit to the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, how it's accelerated deployment of data and analytics capabilities supported by wireless infrastructure? Yeah,
we've seen that as if you look at where we have existing transit systems. So let's say in New York, the MTA, the TTC in Toronto, Hong Kong, and obviously we're just starting in London. It's interesting to see that a lot of the use cases around analytics, around 5G, have actually moved in the last year, because of the pandemic. So, for example, in Toronto, we've deployed, what BAI design data analytics that looks at foot traffic and trying to anticipate the crowding through the system. So, that's something that we have thought about for other purpose, but actually the COVID-19 pandemic has actually accelerated the need for that, and make sure that you can monitor social distancing, monitor passenger load, access to transport services, and all of that. But it goes beyond that. There is also a lot of use cases we're doing for the MTA that around safety, for example. So the example of the help point that we're deploying across, I think it's more than 1,000 help points that we have across almost 200 stations in New York. But also other elements, other part of the world where maybe has been a little bit less impacted by COVID-19, like Hong Kong, for example, where we work more towards things like driverless train application, or real-time video surveillance, for example. Some areas of infotainment, for example, live infotainment, and this sort of area. So there are really many cases, but yes, it is very true that a lot of the use cases that we have developed and put in place in the last year have been COVID-19 impacted, for sure.
Well, thank you. That's a serious subject, but I wanted to ask about that. It's had an effect in so many people's lives.
Indeed.
What is your experience like? This is just talking general matter here. What is your experience like as the group chief executive of an international company? And I'm reading you're splitting your time on several continents. What is that like for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And you said I'm splitting my time between continents. It is true from an hour standpoint. Unfortunately, last year, obviously, it has not been the case physically. And I have to say, I'm missing that a little bit. That's the part I've missed the most, is be able to, to meet customer and, to meet our teams. I've been able to do a little bit of that, but obviously no international travel. And it's, it is strange. It's a change, and you make things work. And I know a lot of people say that, but I have to say personally, beyond the statement of making things work, and they do work, and you work long hours. I think personally, I'm missing also a little bit of, as I said, the contact with people and customer. And I have a little bit of that in London, but I don't have that with our team in the US, for example, or our team in Australia, or team in Hong Kong, or team in Canada. And I have to say, I look forward to the day. And I think these days are approaching where at least, maybe not as much as before, but can spend a week, a month in the US, for example, which, I've not been able to do, even acquiring a company like Mobility, which is a very, very strange thing to do, I would say. Yeah.
Yes. Is there anything you wish I would have asked you that I didn't think to ask?
So I think the only thing I would say is we're very excited. The latest deal with TfL, with Mobility, I guess demonstrate really our ambition for growth and become a leader in this 5G neutral host infrastructure. But maybe just to add that obviously we don't want to stop here. For sure, we want to focus on delivering on these deals, delivering on these organic and non-organic wins. But we also want to continue to push more. And we have the chance to have also very ambitious and supportive shareholders. And we want to continue to drive really all these neutral host solution for MNOs. That we talked about. Small cell venues, private networks, smart cities, fiber, and drive our transit communication business. I think what we have done is only the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we can do for MNOs and for transit agency.
Well, BAI is taking some phenomenal steps in increasing its presence and service to customers in the United States through its transit in New York. You mentioned San Francisco and Seattle coming up through Mobility. Mobility's towers, its multiple small cells. Other activities, I think you have transit in Toronto, Hong Kong, and then these plans for London Underground. Oh, I wanted to mention, I had in my notes to ask you about TfL, but I didn't have it as that abbreviation, so I wasn't sure what you meant when you said TfL.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I just had it as Transport for London.
That's correct. And, as you know, we are very bad in our industry overall. Not that I want to use that as an excuse to use a three-letter word. So that's another one that is actually used officially quite a bit in the UK. I guess when I said MTA, then you knew what I was talking about, or yes. TTC for Toronto Transport. So, but yeah, TfL Transport for London, indeed. Yeah.
Igor Leprince, Group Chief Executive Officer of BAI Communications. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.